writing music is only a very minor part of composing. For me, walking is much more time-consuming part of composing. When I practically every time when I end up in a deadlock, I go out for a walk, and just as easily as I find paths for my walk, I also find paths for my composing. Usually writing music is very boring and hard work for me because I seem to always be ahead of myself in my thinking, and it's difficult to get there, to achieve what I have been thinking, and knowing that I'm far away from where my thoughts already are. Composing music is 99% about imagination, and then you just start taking off things that fall outside the limits. I always base my works on my ear only, so that I don't have any set systems or methods that I'm using when I'm writing, but rather that my inner ear is telling me whether this is going to be good enough for me. And if it is, and it contains some quotations or some audible influences from rock music or jazz or anything, then so be it. In my musical world, there is the work, the composer and his or her work, the musicians and the audience. And all these three and all other possible parts that belong to this scene, they must communicate with each other. While I was nearly finishing a work, I realized that the concept behind my idea here comes from a tiny little detail that I've experienced some 3 years previously. And it's a funny moment when you realize that there is something behind this work, let's call it inspiration, that you haven't been aware of. It happens to me often, quite often, that when I see an interesting painting or sculpture or such like, I, so to say, hear it, and it turns in my mind into music. And this synesthetic sense works the other way around, so that when I imagine or when I hear music, I see it as some kind of picture. I see colors and shapes and surfaces and rhythms and values and all those attributes that you usually use with visual arts. And I've often said that to me music is rather part of visual arts than anything very independent, but that's just me. Most often, after several minutes of ready written music, the piece becomes more independent and starts taking itself into some certain direction that I'm following. And there is the joy when I notice that, okay, now I've reached the point where this is really becoming something. I have the feeling that I'm free to write whatever I want as a composer in Finland. Of course, it leads into a situation where not all doors are open for me all the time. If I choose this path, it takes me somewhere. But at the same time, I can choose another path. And yet there is still another door which will be open for me. As a composer, I'm most happy, obviously as most composers are, when I learn that someone has picked up my work for a performance without my influence, without me knowing about it. There are more works that I'm itching to write that are not commissioned yet than I ever have the time to write. With experience, composing becomes easier all the time because you know what the difficulties are. And it's easy to tackle them in advance. Like so many other Finnish composers, I have to travel abroad all the time, and I have to spend time in Paris or in Berlin or places like that, and just to draw in the influences and listen to other kind of life and other kinds of music, and it's very important. It's always been like that.